Brad Underwood had a lot of excuses after that disaster against Nebraska. And while valid, what he didn't acknowledge was a lot of those excuses were his fault.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome all to another live, shorter, hopefully, edition of Locked On Illini. My plan is to only go about 10, 15 minutes or so, but we'll see what happens. My name is Sunny Verma. Obviously, you can find me on all the socials. Do a search for Locked On Illini on whatever your favorite social media is. Send me a message. I got a lot yesterday. A lot of people venting to me, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys reach out to me when you want to discuss anything Illinois, whether it's basketball or football. Just to send me a message. Just try to keep it constructive. That's the only thing I ask. Even if you have negative feedback, that's fine, but keep it constructive. Thank you also, of course, to making us your first listen each and every day. And for this bonus episode, I want to thank Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So Illinois loses to Nebraska Thursday evening, and it's a game where obviously a lot of people have jumped off the bandwagon at this point. And quite honestly, I understand why. There's a lot of frustrations. It's less than 24 hours later, but usually the post game I allow myself and whatever guests I have to vent and give up whatever hot takes that they want, and get whatever's on their mind out and into the open. And it's again a little less than 24 hours, but I've had time to think about things. Some things good, more things bad, and I just kind of want to talk about it as we wrap things up here on a Friday. And first and foremost, I think the story of this game is Brad Underwood. And actually, what I'll actually start with is I was probably one of the few people who really had a bad feeling about this game to begin with. And I'm just going to play a clip from the preview episode that I recorded the day before Thursday. Illinois opened up as a 2.5-point favorite. And I'm going to tell you guys, Locked On Illini Nation, I'm a little nervous about this game. Nebraska is a team that Illinois should beat soundly, but I've only had this level of confidence this season. I've seen it happen against USC, and I even thought that we would be beating Maryland. Sure, things changed a little bit when I found out Ivisic was gone, but as I've said this before on this channel, Illinois is just one of those teams where those peaks are high and those valleys are low, and I'm very paranoid that Thursday night could be one of those games where it just ends up being one of those disaster performances. The other thing, again, I worry about is if Illinois shoots the three-pointer 40 times, there's a chance they only make 8 of them. There's a chance they only make 9 or 10 of them. And so then what happens, right? Then they lose. Illinois ended up shooting, I believe, 10 for 42 from the field on Thursday night. And, I hate to say, because that number just stuck out at me, because I remember saying something like I can see them shooting 43 pointers, but there's a scenario where they're only going to make 8, 9, or 10 of them, because right now this team is just not a good 3-point shooting team. I believe it was Sam Ober, and I also saw it in other areas of Twitter saying that since that Oregon game, the Illini have made only 25% of their 3-point shots. Quite frankly, that's not even a below average 3-point shooting. This is a bad 3-point shooting team, which is bad because this team is built on its 3-point shooting. I listened to Brad Underwood's post-game press conference after the post-game, my post-game here was over, as I usually do. I usually go live immediately afterwards. So as all of you guys do know, so I don't get a chance to really listen to the post-game press conferences until I'm done. But, Brad, there was a lot of, Tommy's not here, and, a lot of excuse making, in my opinion, and this is very much a pro Brad Underwood podcast, and don't think that I've changed my mind in any sort of ways at all. It's just, I think right now we're kind of seeing his flaws highlighted. And his flaws just meaning, I think he's a great game planner, but he sticks to the script so much that anyone with eyes can sometimes see that you have to deviate a little bit, and Brad seems to always be the last guy in that arena to figure it out. And unfortunately, it's cost Illinois a great deal sometimes in some occasions. Sometimes he never figures that out. And all of a sudden, Illinois has an early exit out of the NCAA tournament. Clear example was yesterday, last night, last play of the regulation, where Nebraska has 3 fouls. It's a tie game. And after the first foul, for some reason, and a lot of you collectively agree with me, Brad Underwood takes out Dre Gibbs Longhorn and brings in Ben Hummerkaus. Now, someone did ask him about it after the game, and Brad said, that's for gravity. Ben Hummerkaus provides the gravity, opens the space up a little bit. And you know what? In a vacuum, that makes sense. If this was just a play randomly from scratch, that makes sense. And you know what? Numbers-wise, analytically, maybe that makes sense. But all of the Illini fans, for the most part, are venting about the same sort of thing. Sometimes you just have to go by the eye test. And Dre Gibbs Longhorn, along with Will Riley, were some of the key pieces to that turnaround in that second half. I've said that on this show, that Dre Gibbs Longhorn is one of those guys who is the only one, I feel like, is giving 100% effort each and every day. Each and every game, he's going all out. He's bringing energy that this team is sorely lacking. And for Brad to take Dre out at the end of the game, for spacing issues, for me, it was just a blunder, and it's just typical kind of Brad missing the trees for the forest and not really seeing that there was probably an alternative plan that would have worked. Because imagine you can't get the ball to Will Riley or Kasparis. At that point, do you trust Ben Hummerkaus, who's 0 for 6 at that point, to make a wide open shot, or Dre Gibbs Longhorn, who's been feeling it, who seems to have one of those, clutch type of genes? It's Dre Gibbs Longhorn. But against Brad, he's adapted so much towards the graphs, the numbers, the analytics, that we applaud him for it most of the time, because again, the system that he's built with Illinois, I think, is fantastic, and it's very smart, and I like what he's done. But he's too reliant on it at sometimes, and I feel like he loses sight and feel of the game in front of him. Now, keep in mind, these are going to sound like excuses, and they're not. Okay, I can be critical about Brad Underwood, like I just was, but I just wanted to step back. A lot of Illini fans are jumping off the bandwagon right now, and there's a lot of opposing fan bases who are, shoveling dirt onto the grave at this point, and that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But remember, when this Illinois team beat Oregon by 30 plus away, a lot of those national writers were talking about Illinois. It was one of the most impressive wins of the season. And, a lot of other Big Ten teams, let's be honest, Illinois has become one of the bigger brand names in the Big Ten conference at this point. And a lot of other fan bases and don't interact very well with the Illini fan base, because you know what? The Illini fan base can be pretty annoying. It can be pretty aggravating. And so when Illinois struggles, it's almost like the Big Ten mafia that's on all social medias rejoice a little bit. But when you take a step back, the flaw right now is, okay, Brad Underwood was talking about how much he misses Tommy. Well, Brad, some of this was your fault, right? Most of this was your fault. And not, it's not necessarily in a bad way. Last year's team, he built, he turned over last year's roster because he wanted a veteran team. He was tired of relying on freshmen like Jaden Epps, a couple others that are slipping my mind right now. So what he wanted to do was build a veteran team, Terrence Shannon Jr., Quincy Guerrier, Marcus Domask, and really make a run for that Elite Eight. And you know what? It worked. Not only did they pass the Sweet 16, which Brad Underwood never got to, but again, they made it to the Elite Eight, eventually losing to the world champion UConn Huskies. Well, what he did is he kind of went all in on that roster. Right. And so when you go all in on a certain roster, when you have that many veterans that you're going to have to turn over that roster. At this point, I'm okay with this move, for the record. I back Brad on what he was doing. So you figure you're going to have to turn over at least 7 guys from last year's roster. Then, over summer, Chester Frazier decides to leave, and he goes to West Virginia. He takes two of his players with him, Sincere Harris and Amani Hansberry. Now, any neutral fan, look, if you're a Brad Underwood hater, you're going to bring this up, but it's just simply not true. But any neutral fan will tell you that once Chester Frazier left, there was no way that Sincere Harris and Amani Hansberry weren't going to follow him. Chester Frazier is the guy that they committed to. And so when he went to West Virginia, Sincere and Amani went shortly thereafter. I wasn't surprised by that at all. But that's two other guys that you possibly had planned to be on your roster this year who are now gone. Let's be okay. Brad Underwood, he missed on Casey Booth or Kerry Booth. Sorry, obviously he missed on Kerry Booth, and that's unfortunate. And I see a lot of people blaming that due to our lack of depth with big men, right? When Johnson gets into foul trouble now that Avicic is gone, we have no one there. You can't throw Jake Davis in there. Ben Hummerkaus is getting killed by big guys. But keep in mind, coming into the season, Brad also thought he was still going to have Ty Rodgers on this team. Now, Ty's not a big man, but he can play like one. And he can bring the toughness to, give you spot minutes as a big man to take on the opposition. Brad doesn't even have that right now. We are just so reliant on Morez Johnson that opposing teams, once they know that Morez gets a quick whistle from the refs, they know you dump it down, get Morez in foul trouble, and you know what? Illinois really has no way to adjust right now because who is that backup? We saw Kerry Booth yesterday. He looked like a kindergarten or playing basketball for the first time with elementary kids, right? Nothing he did fixed or fit into the system that Illinois plays. And so then what are your backup big options? There's none. And so, yes, when Brad is saying that this team misses Tomislav, it's true. It's 100% true. You see how good defensively this team is when Tommy's on the floor. Those back cuts that Nebraska probably stole 6 to 8 points on Thursday night, it doesn't happen when Tommy's in there because Tommy's a vocal leader. He can let the guys in front of him know what he's seeing so they can be prepared for it. Morez maybe just has not learned that yet. So again, when Brad says that he misses Tommy, it's absolutely true. Okay, but let's talk a little bit more positive, right? Because I didn't want to make this a completely negative episode because I know that's what all of Illini fans are doing right now. And I get it. Get it out of your system. This is probably not going to what your plan was for this season. But is it? That's the question, right? When you have this amount of massive roster turnover where you're replacing 10 guys, if we didn't know the record and you told us the night before the season started that Illinois would be 18th in KenPom, they would be 14th in net, and we'd be seeing their stats, where they rank. I believe they're the 7th highest scoring team in the country. Most of us would say, hey, that's not bad. That's not bad for this team with the amount of roster turnover that you had. Now, I guess it depends on what kind of expectations you had coming into this year. If you're one of those Illini fans, and I actually think this is more the minority, that your expectations was to repeat what we did last year and make another Elite Eight run, you 100% should be disappointed. Then I completely understand your anger and why you're upset right now. I feel like the majority of Illini fans would be kind of content with the Sweet 16, knowing that this is a rebuild year. Illinois was projected to be 4th in the Big Ten preseason poll. Right now, I believe they're only 1 or 2 slots behind that. Now, those early victories and those, convincing victories, the 20-plus victory points, 30-plus points, kind of put the spotlight on Illinois, which I don't know if the Illini were necessarily ready for. And with that came higher expectations for what we wanted this team to be. I think a lot of us neutrals, me included, because again, I had a Sweet 16 expectation, hope coming into this year. But seeing them play the way they did against teams that were supposed to be very good, Oregon was one of the teams that was talked about possibly winning the Big Ten conference this year. All of a sudden, I adjusted mid-season, early season, my expectations that, hey, this Illinois team, on its best night, They can go toe-to-toe with anybody. We saw it happen against Tennessee, who was the number one team in the country. Illinois lost in the last second. They can play with anybody. This should be the Big Ten front runner, and this should be a team that's capable of winning a Final Four. Has that ultimately changed? I don't think so. And a lot of you may disagree. But I do think we're just seeing the low point of this team, which right now just things can only go good if everything is right. And right now, there's a lot of things going wrong for this team, especially by missing Ivisic. But I said this on the previous episode. Imagine Ivisic, let's say he comes back in a week or two, and you have a strong Ivisic and Morez Johnson in your starting front court. I say starting front court because Brad Underwood said in the post-game press conference that, he may have to figure something out with the starting lineup because it's not working. Well, what if Morez and Ivisic are on the court together? You have not only an elite, I'm talking top 10 defense in the country, and top 10 defense in the country, no matter how much you struggle on offense, will keep you engaged. But I think we caught a glimpse of how important Ivisic can be in that Michigan State game, where even though he had what we now know as mono, he carried that offense. He was a playmaker on that offense because Kasparis couldn't play. So Morez Johnson, Ivisic together in the front court, I think is going to fix a lot of potential problems for this Illinois team. The problem is, will the three-point shot ever fall? That's an answer I don't know. That's an answer none of us truly know, because Brad is not going to adjust. And again, this kind of comes back around to what I started this episode talking about. Brad is a numbers guy. Brad is an analytics guy. He brought up, points per possession in the postgame press conference yesterday because that's the data that he's reading. And he was asked, is there at some point do you want to change things around? Do you want to switch things around? It's not going to happen. I have very little faith that Brad Underwood is going to switch things around. But let me ask you, and let me know in the comments, how would you change things? He built this team for a certain style of offense. They've practiced all summer long a certain style of way. Obviously, it worked in the offseason. And obviously, it worked at the beginning of the year. You know how I know that? Because at that point, they didn't deviate. They didn't change. So the shots were falling. The system was working at some point. Now, when, in my opinion, their most important player on defense is gone, they look a little scattered now. They look a little disorganized now. Keep in mind, even though it's Ivisic's first year, he's like 22 years old. He's played in grown man leagues in Europe. He's a basketball veteran by almost every aspect. Now, a lot of people will say, well, an Illinois team shouldn't be so reliant on one guy or even two guys. When Kasparis is out, Illinois plays the same way. And sure, you're right. But again, we forget the amount of roster turnover that Brad Underwood had this past offseason, replacing 10 guys. He hit on most of them. Tomislav, triple. Kasparis, home run. Kylan Boswell, I guess I would say probably a single or double. Will Riley, to be seen. Hummerkaus, single. Kerry Booth, obviously, swing and a miss. But he didn't bat 1,000. I think that's kind of the point. And so because you're replacing 10 guys, it's hard to hit 10 times. And that's what he didn't do. And right now we're kind of feeling the ramifications of it by having a team not nearly as deep as we want it to be, and it being super vulnerable, unfortunately. I will tell you, my mind ultimately has not really changed on this Illinois team. And I know a lot of you are going to disagree, and I don't blame you for it. And I don't blame you for mocking me for believing this way, if you want to, in the comment section or in the chat. But Brad's right. Once Tommy comes back, this team is going to look better. I genuinely do believe it, because I think the more Morez plays, the more he gets acclimated to this Big Ten, style of play. I could correct myself right now, right? I mean, we've been waiting for the team to be whole. Maybe the team's not going to be whole. And if the team's not going to be whole, this team has a lower floor. And I've said this months ago. This team has a lower floor than all the other contending teams in the Big Ten Conference. What's unfortunate is we're seeing that lower floor. And it's because we saw the highest highs. A lot of Illini fans now are abandoning the team at this lowest low. I'm not going to be one of those guys. I understand Brad's makeup of this team. I understand his strategy of what he wants to see on the floor. The execution needs to be worked on. And, I'll go more in depth of what needs to change moving forward in a future episode. But, at least for this Friday, I just wanted to, roughly 24 hours later, reevaluate everything and say that, yeah, I'm disappointed. But, some people are calling this an absolute failure of a season right now when we're only halfway through the Big Ten. I think that's silly. I think if you look at the circumstances of this year, that the team has done okay. I'm not giving them an A. If anything, I'd give them maybe a B minus, right? A B is like basically the expectation. My hope is to finish top 4. If they don't finish top 4 in the Big Ten Conference, then I'll be disappointed and I'll say they didn't hit my goals. And I'll tell you, my goals are probably lower than what Brad Underwood's goals are and the team's goals are. But, all things considered, the highs were great. A lot of people were talking about Illinois, right? Unfortunately, the lows are unfortunate. And a lot of people are talking about Illinois. Like your favorite content creator out there is making a What's Wrong with Illinois video right now. Why? Because it gets clicked. It gets many, many clicks. It pays, mortgages. It pays for diapers. I'm doing it, of course, but I'm an Illini content creator. I'm talking about the, Field of 68, all the national people. Illinois is popular to talk about because, hey, they're fun to watch. But man, when they're bad, they're kind of fun to make fun of as well. I'll get to a couple of your comments right after this. All right, it's January 31st, and that means officially I've produced an Illini-based video every day this month. So if you don't mind, if you can hit that subscribe button, the like button on this video if you're watching it, I would sincerely appreciate it. We have 24 people watching and only 22 likes, or 2 likes. So that's not going to work. If you guys don't mind, I know the team is struggling, but you know what? I'm here for you guys each and every day because I love this team. I love the school, and we're fun to talk about. And I'm not ready to give up hope, and I hope a lot of you are not either. AJ says he could have taken Boswell out in overtime and at the end of regulations. Yeah, the problem with Boswell is, and again, I will definitely talk about this in the future, is like offensively. When he's cutting to the rim, he's great. I love it. He's so thick that opposing point guards have trouble stopping him. And while he's not making the percentage of close shots that I'd want him to make, he's making enough. And I think it keeps the defense honest. What is unfortunate is every time Kylan decides to pull up for a step back 3-point shot with 11 seconds left on the shot clock. That's just a wasted opportunity. And that's one of the little things, of which there's many, that Illinois and Brad Underwood have to fix if the team is to turn their season around right now. Jason says, dumpster fire. It's bad right now. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty bad. Jason says, I would remove Ben from the starting lineup. It's going to be really interesting for me to see, watching Brad, if he's willing to really just go down with Ben Hummerhouse. Earlier on in the season, Brad was making excuses for Ben, and I kind of understood it, saying, hey, he needs Ben to reach the eventual ceiling that this Illini team has. And I still genuinely do believe that. If Ben Hummerhouse is the player that he showed like a month ago or the last couple of game stretch, then Illinois' ceiling has been lowered drastically. That's not a Final Four team. But, at this point, we're over 50% of the season done. And Ben's just not producing. And is Brad willing to make that adjustment now? Or is he just willing to just go down with Ben Hummerhouse? I hope not. I hope that, again, I called it at the beginning of the season. I think a Morez, a Visic lineup could be a death lineup for opposing teams because there's maybe one team that can match the bigs that Illinois can have on the court together. But again, that relies on Tomislav. How long is Tomislav gone for? None of us know the answer to that question. He could be back by Rutgers next week, or he could be gone for another month or so. None of us, unfortunately, know that. Rose says, I think we're cooked. Brad should put you-know-who on the bench because he stinks. We take way too many threes and no inside game at all. And Joe says, KJ, Boswell, Dre, Riley, Big Mo, sub, Brickhouse in for Merez. He does have some size. Yeah, again, just the fact that he acknowledged something about the starting lineup in that post-game press conference perked my ears because I didn't think he would. He seems to be like, no, they'll be fine. The shots will go in. I want them to keep shooting. But the fact that he acknowledged that maybe he needs to change something with the starting lineup kind of has me optimistic. But we'll see. It's just one of those where now I'm at the point where I've changed my mindset. I changed it after Maryland, that I'm no longer thinking about winning the Big Ten Conference. Right now, it's just more so, hey, let's finish in the top 4. And right now, Illinois is not even in the top 4. They're 4, 5. They're 6th, right? That's 6 and 5. And you know what? They got a very tough matchup against Ohio State on Sunday, which I'll have a preview for on Saturday because that's what I do. I don't miss any days for Illini content for you guys. But, I guess I'll wrap it up. I was supposed to go for 15 minutes. And of course, I end up doing a full episode again. We're at almost 27 minutes. Thank you all for tuning in. Please, on your way out, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Just know that things will be okay. I genuinely believe it. Enjoy your weekends. ILL. Love you guys.